What happened?
Nothing. Barway Dorje Gyamtso Sorwande Rana Rondo Nije Topgyal Gyamtso Le Kodakin Kanagi Tila Ranzanam Yegombang Yo Lazo Tinita Samala Piro Nama Samala Ningon de Kiata, Teta Nindo, and Samba Sancho to Tokine, and the same cures.
Good afternoon, my Dharma friends. Please listen with the motivation of Bodhicitta.
Bodhicitta Yang so Jit on the Jit, Bodhicitta the Yang so sent the Ji Yang, and Tipachimo Lord John the sent the Jit, Gina, Randon Yizik Lord Chandra. One Tranek Rampa Jit. Rang the Ma, on the Dutch in the Lord Hukchimbo, not so Samala, Mara and the Pay Hukchimbo, and Allah and Rick Hukchimbo. They also Simjiti, Simji de la, Samba Sanjo, Teda, Tamjik, Domar de la, Samatona, Marang Domar, so good sorrow the heart and Nasa de Pa, Tango. Then Simji Latin, Sanje Sangia Korova. Then the Simji say the Pekadin Chimbo. Drying under Nin and the Simji Sayana, Garden Chimbori. Then Ba, Zengarin Garina, then Pora Dranini Chiabar Mewanda, some the Sancho same treat about Zewa treat about it and Richard Corre. Nga Sayat Pa, Jido Corre, then Nga Sayat Jigori, the Mama and Nga Sayat Jigori. Kieram Gomya, their Lama Gomya, their Simji Gomya, their Sama. Heng Dabal in the Sonam Sots are called, Heng Madabal in the Sonam Sots are called, Nika Gatin Chimori. Heng Dabal in the Sanje, Sanjo Sambatamji, Lama Dela, Dinner Sonam Sots are called, Gatin Chimori. Heng Madabal in the Simji Tamji in the Sonam Sots are called, Nika Mato Gatin Chimori. Then you come in Sangia Kom, Sangia Yomari, Danzen Tartokumari. Then you Sancho the Trinso Yang, see the Gite, Simji, Train the Gina. Then Tata Nasa at Miocha. When only chant for Sadi, Dela, there's a Naso Tanya near and Lohan Samton.
The point of repeatedly reinforcing the motivation of bodhicitta is so that we become less selfish. The more we think about others, other beings, the more we lessen our own suffering, because much of our suffering is produced by preoccupation with ourselves. In this regard, friends and enemies are the same. They are beings other than ourselves. And so together, all beings, friends, enemies, and those in between, constitute an important field of accumulation for us. Of course, we also cultivate the accumulations through meditation on the Guru, and by thinking of the Guru, imagining the Guru, we lessen our selfishness as well. But in this regard, the pure field of the Guru and the three jewels and the impure field of sentient beings are equally important. And it is through contemplating both of these fields of accumulation in their respective ways that we become closer and closer to selflessness.
Oh, didn't Tanga Zolamana saw a trouble top Sarvadi, they tap Goya Gyamtso, Topgyal Sinji Labata, Lama the Yin, John the Bucket Topgyal, they Topgyal, Dag Juice in the Lapa Sinji Laws, Lama Topgy Sinji Lapsaya, Deke, Lama Ken, also Topgy Sinji Lapsayate, Topgy Sinji Lamne, also Tarik Konikubanagiri. And drove them her such sermon yours on the drove them her Sanjaka, drove them her sack, Sertokamarisom, Nij Topa Yin Pomunusom, Chuni Havatim torn yours on Sanjaka song. Then the Lama can so then the Chusong get a song so Yang, Tan Gomredu, then it teach Chuni Havatinga taken us so drawn. Lama took you some Sayat Teddy, took you some tongue. And
the next line in the supplication is, "Bless me with your compassion." And this really explains what we are praying for. The reason or purpose of our prayer is so that through his compassion, the Guru bless us. But in this regard, we need to remember that the Buddha cannot actually remove our suffering with his hand or transfer us, give us his realization. That the Buddha blesses us, and therefore the Guru blesses us by teaching or showing us the peace of Dharmata.
Then mata cheve ju kor ngim jong ki sambe ju li tambe chu chu ko parchi me par drop the salam ki yonti rab zo ko yu ko pan cho nyor da topar gombu sinjilo son den gombu se da lama gombu sinjilo son ta te par da den so ta pari then this mata cheve sing also ta te la pe nga so ta changma nga so pe big problem really to mata chawa se ga some tom tarong na so yan ko the duk yin some yan ko the duk you some dok chi tabri hal le ba se ko sana da na da lo jima da dok chi tabri hal le ba ki nga so sen de nga so pe chu la parchi hal le ba ki ko chim bo se ko de nga so da de mata ba de ko chim bo hi na wa de hidan ro kam do ndi ma bo na wa ro kam ri Then chung yang taba ki drop gona mataba mean chu yang taba drop kamari. Mataba de chwa mataba. Nga cheji yen, che nipa ki yen, sanye hyaki. Dokong hyasun tata rang chi nga che ndo nipa mi sam. Chi ki de song ro da chebi ki nam hyanda man chobi ki ne hyanda nyo deyang chebi ki ne nyor ro song. Chi ki mambo re. Chi ki ne gare hyuku mari. Then the Tata so Tata to the Saman Dram and Radam, Motan Dram and Radam, Tsering Dram, the Trechen Dram and Radam, so Kadisha Hakomari, Matapa the one, Yang Sam the Tango. They do the chit, young Lama Sinjil of the source, Lama the Sor and the name young Coral and Nipper Jong. Coral and Nipper Manjong, Chundro Kamarida, Cheson Coral the Toa Yuna, Chundro Kamari. Savanini Yoman, Chula Parchi, Chekut, Coral and 做有吧的，去了把机切去的的，考完了做就干有嘛的，我那嘛的，那个大俺做这，做那个电锅的考完了能做到嘛的，考完谁呀的，我那去还讲个，俺做的干不了这个，三节个啥了，把机长给的考完了，但考完了严重结果，考完了严重嘛结呢，三节个啥都头个嘛的，가르에서는 코로나 nghiêm重써야 돼. 줄 좋고 공원에 데려오면 고치를 생각하는 연구는 nghiêm重 고세 걸 맞은 게 바로 만져 고세도 고세가 말이야. 고 마시는 저런 나나 랩가 말이야. 때모를 그 말이야. 때는 코로나 nghiêm重 써야 돼. 개체모. 한중 코로나 nghiêm重 써야 돼. 혁체모 제해명서 로청조가 값서 코로나 종한로 왔다 따따 때모로 왔다 로야 조야로 왔다 하장내 저 좋아 친구. 다 들으면도 로아 친구들은 코로나세야 되는 현의 계제 뭐도가 해봐나기 세도가 수반나기 포이즈 세 수반나기 코로나리도 삼니르게 삼노 코로나 샤상 코로나 내가 좋아리마 마다바라고는 삼노 야야 동 토큰도 다다 나라나 삼당 체크도 마다바도 다다 삼노 데스 땅 토큰도 로본으로 송바나기 린도 다코 브레드 앤 브레드 아웃 앤 샤이 파탄 샤케 유히그 마링아서 데 원원이 로바데 세컨 간다되는 거 저기에서 대송 the 로본으로 제 대는가 꼬리게 삼노도 나랑 많이도 효기 다 랑게 어디리 파창을 삼노 기랑 걸금도 효기 파장아 직신은 다 샤디 히마리 삼지 그 건다 삼노야 동 삼노야 보통 같이 겨우나 형이 같이 삼노야 보통 라마나 도인지 상 제게 원 히도 틀리를 뭐냐야 야 되니 거 다들 고마 따바들 다들세 그 되니 효기 거리게 야 랑겨요 바깝슬라 혀다마다 담보 따게 요구마 등하는 로코메어 말이 혀다마다 직신은 혀차르요나 간신데 트와이나 간신 라야 요바데상 도로딘데 삼노당 도 되니 오 당아 혀마다레상 되니 또라지 양 라마 control 소란데 심지게 동 간다양의 심지를 누체리문도 요 심지게 돈은 접고 간다의 심지게 돈 자체 뭐만도 나 누체리문도 some Mona Yang the Messim Mambo the Nutri Horkano, the Tapkimado Mamma Puchan and Rodio. In Aranki Gondrogona and Rodico Tsawanangi, Tenduri, then the Milarepa Nangi, then the Madaba, Chua Madate, Ju Yabo, Cortona, Chu the Mone Yabondokari, Chona Chanoko Mina, Chu Yabondokari. Then Chua Mada Gomja, the Chona Chanokamari, Chaman Pinkari, Gyamtso Milarepa Sonro, and Cheven Jane rather song, Namche Chami Gongoni, Chimi Yom Zinsase, Dangan Chevenji for the tower song. The Druid are then Chen Chawal and Jitame or Chandra. Then Chimi Yuma Zinsa Sensa, then Yom Mo Yikiman the George Sadu, then Zinsa Sensa, Lama Salat in Yoksari Sen. Then Marathon Jobsari. They part the Madan Chevi, you go Nimjonki, Sambe Julins, Sam Konape, Julin Toba, Ju Jombo Tatangasol Bay, Chapot. They the legend of Lin Tobar, Yon Hos, or Tambichu, Sama, Lin Tobar, Yon Hos, the rich song called Tela, the Parchi Meber, Salamna, Satalam, Satam, Nippon, Kubajoba, Satalam, Tibaramba, Regan, the Salam, the Parchi Meva, Lama Chiki Yon Tobi Hosa, then you got a Yiki on the Yonso Zoba, Sajela Kanyo, Dorje Kanyo, got a Yiki on the Yonso Zoba, the Journal, Gombo Cheetah. Nyambara Sinja love those Gombo cheat and Yamazan Gombo, Dom Gombo, the Lama, the Dom Gombo, Dom Gombo, Sangia Lama, Dom Gombo, Sangia, but the Lama Sangia, but then Sangia and Kipari. Then the Sangia, the Dom Nyorto Toban, Lama Gombo cheat, Sinja love those oars, that they surrender.
The remaining lines in this supplication fill out what you mean by bless me. Protector, grant your blessing that my being is moistened by thoughts of impermanence, death, and renunciation, that I complete all aspects of Dharma practice without impediment, that I perfect the qualities of all levels and paths, and that I quickly attain the supreme state of the four bodies. So when you say, bless me, what you're asking for is these blessings, the blessings that you be able to turn your mind to the Dharma, and through doing so, traverse and perfect the path. The first blessing that you ask for is that my being be moistened by thoughts of impermanence, death, and renunciation. This comes first because, in a sense, it confronts our biggest problem. Our biggest or most immediate problem is our denial of impermanence. We have developed all kinds of ways of shielding ourselves from impermanence, and especially from the death. Now, I know that you hate hearing about this, but in fact, the fact that you hate hearing about this is what I'm talking about. We don't like the word death. We don't like thinking about death. We don't like the word impermanence. We don't like thinking about it. And that's a problem. The best way to deal with death is by accepting it. We have to accept several things. First thing is, I am going to die. That is definite. We should bear that in mind all the time, that we are going to die. It's as though we manage to forget this. We think, Well, probably not for a long time. I'll worry about it then. And sometimes we even seem to think, maybe I won't die. But we will. And the longer we ignore the fact that we are going to die, the less prepared we will be when that day comes. So the first thing we need to keep in mind is, I am definitely going to die. That is certain. If I know anything, I know that. The second thing is that I don't know when. I could die today. I could die tonight. I might even not die until tomorrow. But I'm going to die, and I won't know when. One of the things about a human mortality is that if you look at the number of conditions and circumstances that can cause your death, and the number of conditions and circumstances that keep you alive, you'll see that the number of conditions and circumstances that could cause your death are far more numerous. Another thing is that even the conditions and circumstances that keep you alive could also cause your death. So most things can kill you, and the things that may not kill you could kill you. So we need to keep this in mind. The line also says impermanence, death, and renunciation. Renunciation here means the determination to be free. Free from samsara. We sometimes call it renunciation because it is giving up on samsara ever being worthwhile. When we are children, and even when we are young adults, we are enthusiastic and excited. We're filled with hope. We're filled with hope that things might work out. The thought, things will work out, is the opposite of renunciation. Things will not work out. Things cannot possibly ever work out. When we tell ourselves that things are working out, we are lying. When we tell others that things are working out, we're lying to them. Unless by things working out, you mean death. If by things are working out, you mean I'm going to die, then things are working out. In fact, it's guaranteed you don't need to worry about it. Things are definitely going to work out. If by working out you mean death, yes. If you mean anything other than death, no. The problem is we ignore this. We either hope that things might still work out, even though the possibility of their working out diminishes second by second. Or we don't want to look at it and we pretend. We tell ourselves, this is okay. It's really okay. It's not okay. Unless by okay, you mean dying. If you're okay with dying, then you're okay. Otherwise, you're not okay. Why do we need to keep this in mind, because if you want to leave the room, you have to open the door. Opening the door is the determination to be free. You will only open the door when you're actually ready, when you've given up on what you want being in the room. If you refuse to get up and open the door, then you're not going to be able to leave the room. So if you want to leave the room of samsara, you have to open the door through determination to be free. As children, as young people, we tell ourselves things are good. Things are okay. We view the world as a kind of buffet or smorgasbord of delicious dishes set out for us. Maturity, from a dharmic point of view, is recognizing that all that food is rotten. All that food is poisonous. Maturity is having no more desire to eat that food than you would to eat food that you know to be poisoned. We really have to live each moment on the edge of death. We really have to live each moment knowing that it could be our last. As Arya Nagarjuna wrote, there is nothing more amazing than when you breathe out and are still alive to breathe in. Each time we breathe out, we should be prepared to die. Each time we breathe out, we should know that we may not have the ability to breathe in again. That may be it. I try to live this way. I try not to take life for granted or assume that I'm going to be alive in the next moment. When I go to sleep at night, I do so without any certainty that I'm going to wake up still alive in the morning. And when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is check to see whether or not I'm dead. Because I might be. I could be dead and in the bardo and not know it, think I'm still alive. So I check to make sure I'm not dead. Then, once I determine that I'm not dead, then I pray to my guru and the 3 jewels and so on. This has to be the basis of our lives for us not to waste them. We have to remember that we live on the edge of death. Then we can go on and pray, as I do in the morning, that we be helpful to others and at least not harmful. So the recognition of the imminence of death is very important. About this, Jetsun Milarepa said, "It was out of fear of death that I fled to these mountains, but now in these mountains I have reached the natural fortress of immortality." It is the fear of death, the recognition of death, that will bring us to a realization of immortality. Notice that in this prayer it says, "Grant your blessing that my being be moistened by thoughts of impermanence, death, and renunciation. Until we reflect upon these things, our beings are like dry soil, dry and stiff and barren and unworkable. We need to moisten our minds, our beings, with these thoughts. And then, grant your blessing that I complete all aspects of Dharma practice without impediment, that I perfect the qualities of all levels and paths, and that I quickly attain the supreme state of the four bodies. The qualities that we're referring to here are the qualities of the bodies, or kayas, and wisdoms that all Buddhas have. And that state of the four bodies or four kayas is the state of any Buddha and the state of the Guru. The awakening of the Guru and the awakening of a Buddha are the same.
All those theory. Angazongone Tatru in the Lama Sor and the Yamini Sitam, Masola Tata Kokavia Poyori. Then in Tata Jingagi Chuki Backups and then you call each other. Directly in our take out the Shajan Shasari to Kondo, then the Chinamba Gomba Matsa Karis in the Sangha say the Dorje Chutela, Kona Chuk Korank energy Novada, then Ricky take out the Hegel, take out the Coco, directly by Hegel in the Richu Koran, then they see then he check Shajan and Garilla Tolopon Hilimari, not so Yomon Ranzin, but in Yomon Bajaja. Color journal as a deal, Ken of Gomba Mansa, then is some money, Shaptra, and Jay and Jake Sam Tangana. Money Tanya Tambo Tanjaki Yana, the Sotamala, Carisi Goderio, Kojo. Takes her Yori Sanku. Then Naranda and Korkin, you want to go, Yop me one Yom Singo, Chasarindo, the Yom Sikil, Moni Charanzo, Jeb and Charanzo, Himjozo, the research, Jeb Samotana, Della Kojero Ori. Then he Jeb the Chamave, Koran Yomaka say, the Yomaka say, Randi, Della Chesapo Mari. Then the Nazoka Tata. Carezo the Dedok Nazola, Dedok Nazola, Dedok, Deva, Dedok Nazola, sensitive shock chamber, that then money Nazoka, Truna Dimberson, Atanki, say at the radio, the Nazo, Truna Dimberson, the body, one Travari, some don't Trava Janjan Mato Jack, Gangang Mubo the Dibato Yomari, Dedok Nika Yomari, Zangi Nika Yomari, Dani Nika Yomari. Only Shatraki and Yomar. Flower the dry Nisaya, only Yomar. Dani Nisaya, the Yomar is the Dani Nika Hincha Kayasi Gomari. Nina Hincha Sama, Dala Hincha Danus Yomari. Koranika, the one Samotanya, Madaba in Yorani. Terren Torang Topo Yao, and son, Torang Lutako Topo and Samar Kuma Subjurway and Choketa Hidula. Sani, don't try Jiman Torah Dari, the Hima. Tata Chora Jaw Shata, one end of the Jaw and sound the Dango Sarayuna. Dawa Jimana Chora Topochadi Hima, someone you're right, Matabari. And Nika de la different Zendo Jakan Yomari, Kora Kare Sena, Nekap Rimato Yomari, and Yomari. The Sotama, Debal Trap Yomari, and so some of the Ninzengan so Chok Chimbore wanted John called it. Then Ninzengan. Draw say out there, the Chagi Chimbor, say out, and draw say out the Dangi Chimbor, say out, see the quality. The Gomari, Hajan Nikatiko, Trua, not so Truna, it's somebody, Mato, you get the but drop your money. Sanitary.
We have the opportunity at this point in our lives to practice in this way and to pray to the Guru. Now, in explaining the attitude with which we need to engage in such prayer, I'm speaking very directly to you. And it's traditional that Vajrayana teaching is supposed to incorporate or include such direct speech or direct talk. Nevertheless, it can be offensive. No doubt some people are offended by this. It is offensive. It is offensive to point out people's kleshas. People who don't have those kleshas aren't offended. But if you have kleshas and I point them out, of course you're offended. But that's the job. We don't want to admit our kleshas. We want to pretend they don't exist. We want to cover them up. It's not polite to talk about our kleshas. It's polite to conceal them, to pretend that they don't exist. And when someone points out our kleshas, we think, well, they're just crazy. They're speaking in a disorderly, crazy manner. And I'm offended because, of course, they're not talking to me. They're talking about somebody else. We don't admit that we're offended because the arrow has hit the target. We claim we're offended because it doesn't apply to us. In short, we're extremely sensitive. Why are we so sensitive? Because we are so deluded. Delusion, in part, consists of treating momentary states or momentary appearances as lasting, permanent entities. That is an important aspect of our delusion. Part of that is our obsession with happiness and misery. We are constantly scrutinizing how good or bad we feel and speculating about what makes us feel good, what makes us feel bad. In that connection, we divide the world into friends and enemies. Those who make us feel good, we call friends. Those who make us feel bad, we call enemies. The problem with that is this can change. Someone you think of as your friend today could be your enemy tomorrow or next week. Someone you think of as your bitterest enemy today could be your friend tomorrow or next week. Nevertheless, in delusion, we mistake momentary appearances to be lasting states or identities.
Then the ngaranso chatsakurwa. Ngaranso chatsakuna. Trobo tomorela tin, troborela tin, gonjapsine, ngala robari zoni sana. Nekapsanrim to zotokamari. Tambicula tin, Yantabar you drop the Dani Dagan Gong Tabari, Sanjik Son, Dani Dagan Goyong Tabarikina, Narani Chatsana, Narangi Chunandaya or Trunda. One take Choransoda, Dedok Sona Yonso Zobat, Ha, Zamazon, send hitting one the pick up the left of Corilla, Simjila Deji pick up the teeth of Corilla. They must say, Zamri Tata Deji and Soari, the son of the Dedok Sona Mambo, Regla Goyong Cordina. Tengan corride, Taroma Montame on corner, the Har Montame when you're in the paint of man. Danger they were togona, Narangarang going to see Tabarek, Lama control the soul and then on the quote, Chinandar drum the Gina, then hero chakri, Milarepa. Temato yin, Tashi, Tropor, Drawagan, Kapsam Rimato, Gaya take Choran Pinta, so new king, Savanin Hakum. They draw say at the Tropo say at the Meva Rekan, Tam you Tonton Higo. 다다 jarsengorcho thomezo 다다 리 jarsengorcho thomezo 다다 jarselani tsamdam lamate khongdan ngaju ta khong lobjang hyogen na yaride jini nyamni tsoseyo khong nyamni tsos ngorcho ri pobi kyosund 코로나 로바로 살 로보로 살 저도 협선을 친구 거래 니마 제가 콩 초합에 힘보려서 니마 지금 초합 힘보리 있는 것도 당하라니 때는 정세도 로바 되게 라마가라니 때는 정세도 대사를 동모를 손에 약사리 마도 칼라사야면도 동모를 쓰는 로콘도 다 칼라사야면도 라메 여기 레이더를 이야는 영가라니 동모로 송 대송사 동모로 로보들은 레바 말아버려 살 Congo Trobo, Lamas, Tommy's art. But the Rangani Homo and Rodicaps and Arani here and the Lona, here the pay Homo Yaborakari, and donation pay Yabotakari, Narani here and the Rogari, the Delok, Asom, Cures the Lama. Lama, the day of Sawani, Marani here down. Cup did you hear the pay Haleba famous in Nagi to put Charles at it that they said Kilom Parmok cups here at the Pizzachimona jails. Then I that the day of woman, Zella Yoman, Narakaya, but he go mother. I son, then the conga take up Jasela in some cause, the name of Tongi Pon Jasela in the conga, Siki, it sounds like it. Kandan roller. 독선 핀저지 투상검 사와냠저 삼다 닌지 메버 저세베 종이 봉아 저세라니 세야 콩게 되냐 못 잡는 되니 콩 로바데라 오케이 다 트레이닝 내가 냐냠든 로모스 체라 간 펜나 펩스 나라 다 로바 자와니 모스 나랑 기본 로케 나랑 기본로 기본사 기본냐 기본 냠네시 기본 호모스 케마도 초랑가 자라 다 트레이닝 줄래 마이 손 콩게 종이데 되도 뽕사 전주게 조봉이 밖에 전주게 내가 저한다 빠프려 대한 대 조봉이 밖에 그 저거로 도세야 되게 전주세 간다 근데 자세야 되라 가레시나 양아 담유 통통 제게 오늘은 말아래바다 다다 금지롱 진람제 니가 조봉이 밖에 되는 말이 잡아도 되는 상계리다 잡아도 되는 상계 말아래바 Jal in the Chesa Tama Hakori, Sakagi Chaza Aka and Tamji Pereven, Conga Jawa Sarti and the Jawa La Kisi, and Congamars of Sangio, Gyamtso. Tata Kumjilung Jiramja Terino, compare Passapori, Jadoma de Tarjalo, the Lone Rondo, Chunduni Pere Passap, Anyo Machin in the Yegan Donor, or Pama Mark Tangi, in the Yoga do, Teni Padilamo, Rematek, Yaravan, Dribes and the Power were all on Kipa. Then Jenny Kong Tasa, the Kong of Jansen, Yenda Mandava, Kong Katsi of Jansen, Tebats the Kong, Lord John Romo, Tenrica, Repatamboro. Then you Kong Kamba, Kake, Chado, Kong Pe, famous and our Chan, of Jan Yayu, then you call Geda Chimboda Chan, with Dropo Kamba Makake, Kong, then Chado, then you pay Topgyal and Kong. Here done Dorje, here done Cont'd, then Jenny Lama the Hua, then Drama neither talking drama yard and Longipa Dorje here. Then you can't roll the cups, then it's some Kaka Kamala to take me back, Xavier exam, Kaka
Dorje, the angel, the Shandaki Joseph.
Then you compare the Conge, Jean Deladina, Lama Cogara the Jardin. Then you come here to get them about the Congian. Then you come Sangiero. Conte Java the Garden Chimboyans over. That ten of Jar was at the Tundu.
They cancelled some shop of the Nishanaki Joseph.
Bill, some to Jatan or the Yabuza. Thank you about that.
Continue is so long, some that the internet we're so captivated by transitory appearances and by our feelings that we actually we may not call it this, but we actually take refuge in feeling good. We take refuge in the food that we want to eat. We take refuge in clothing that we want to wear. And we take refuge in our friends, people who gratify us, people who please us, people who tell us what we want to hear. Unfortunately, we've been taking refuge in these things throughout beginningless time, and it hasn't gotten us anywhere. If we keep on taking refuge in mundane pleasures, mundane companions, this whole cycle will be endless. So it's suggested that we should rather take refuge in Dhamma, take refuge in the Guru and the three jewels. And it's also important to understand that appearances can be deceptive. And then Lama said, I'll tell you a couple of stories about friends and enemies. Now, most of you are familiar with the short versified text, the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, which was composed by a great master called Muchu Tome. Tome was his name. It's the Tibetan for a Sangha. And Muchu was the name of the cave. Muchu means Mercury. It was the cave where he meditated. Initially, Muchu Tome studied for a long time in monastic colleges, and then he went into retreat and lived in a cave. For some time, he had a friend, another monk, who was living there with him. And one day, his friend said to him, there's nothing to eat here. We'd better go begging in a nearby village. So Tome said, okay. And they got ready to go. And then his friend said, we'll get better offerings if we say we're from the college, Bodhicitta, than if we say we're doing retreat in a cave. And the reason for this was that at that time, the monastic college system was fairly new and had quite a bit of prestige attached to it. And so what his friend said was true. Had they said that, people would have given them more offerings. But Tome said to him, he said, no. I'm not going to lie in order to get more food. So why don't you go off on your own and let's live apart and you take care of yourself. And it seems that it was at that time that he was writing, that Tome was writing the 37 practices. And that was the day that he wrote the stanza that says, distancing yourself from evil companions is the practice of a bodhisattva. We see the same thing in the life of Palta Rinpoche. And then in contrast, we see equally evident historical examples of how people have not been deceived by friends, but have been benefited by enemies. The case of Jetsun Milarepa, of course, is very well known. It was because of the enmity of his uncle and aunt that he ended up entering the path and studying with Marpa. Another famous example is that of the omniscient Longchenpa. Longchenpa, the Sangpure. In his 20s, first of all, Longchenpa was extraordinarily intelligent from an early age. And there are lots of stories about his childhood, such that his parents weren't quite sure what to do with him, and he was protected by Mahakali, and then returned to the parents, and so on. But anyway, he was extremely intelligent. And so he was studying at the college and monastery of Songhu. And Longchenpa was from central Tibet. But there were some students at that college who were from eastern Tibet, were Khampas, like Lama was from eastern Tibet. So, and they got very, very jealous of Longchenpa's ability. He could just basically read anything and immediately understand it. And they got very, very jealous of him. And they basically kicked him out of the college. They made it impossible for him to remain there, which is a terrible thing, except that the result of that was that he ended up meeting and studying with his guru, Kukuraja, from whom he received the heart essence teachings of both of Vimalamitra. And so it's because those nasty Eastern Tibetans kicked Longchenpa out of Songhu College that the Dzogchen teachings still exist. So we actually owe a great deal of, we have a great debt to those nasty Eastern Tibetans. And if you want to know how nasty they were, Longchenpa wrote a poem about it that has been translated by a very good translator named Adam Piercy, who translates lots of Dzogchen material. And you can get it online. If you go to lotsawahouse.com or .org, anyway, just put in Lotsawa House, then you get to the main website, and then you can enter in the author, and you put in Longchenpa, or you can enter in the translator, either way. And then under Longchenpa, if you look at the writings that are translated there, and you're allowed to read this and download this is there. It's very good resource. Then if you look, there will be, it's clearly identified as the poem that he wrote about how nasty those Eastern Tibetans were. So again, the poem is about how nasty Eastern Tibetans can be. Well, you brought it up.
I know.
It's very, very nice,
Yeah,
and it's a beautiful translation. And in general, Lotsawa House is an amazing resource. Yeah, it's a syllabary poem, which means that it was written so that it's 30 lines, and each line begins with one letter of the Tibetan alphabet. The way Adam Piercy translated it is he translated it as 26 lines, beginning with A and then B and so on, and it works, and it's fun. It's a funny song. Again, it's about, the subject is how nasty and rude. It goes on about how rude and the people boy.
That is a bit. Kong the Kambatas to the Baja Jachimbono. There's a Nimbono and the Konzok Lama, Konzok Yojo and the Lama Chik, Konga Jalata, Navzata, Koze, the Peta Yapoti, Kopatang Yaksari. And the Lama got Tapshim in the Tendrisia, the Unjibak Hako. Hako, who is Chesoganga, Karesek, business in Hako, Lama Chikangala, the Pechata, Togota, Kuchita, Tosonga, Nangomondos, Rochita, Roke, Lama la Conge, Ticapsala, the Tugichisea, the Soma, there's a con Tankin, the tire.
Yeah, they basically they set him up with this situation where they made him anyway. If you read the poem, you'll see they set him up badly. They really made it. They were very nasty, and they set him up so that he really had to leave. And as a result, we have the heart essence teachings today.
Then the long chamber, then it comes to contain it on your come back on garden chamber and so on. 대그 모나면 인사리 다다 적힌 바데 적힌데 양부의 칸이 칸다 소리 우리는 와 칸의 용거 대가서 칸이 우리는 로 그래 다다 우리는 칸의 용거 모나면 지세야 돼 하고야 용
So the aspirations are so funny because Longchenpa, of course, achieved awakening and made the aspirations, of course, that all who had connection with him be benefited, and especially because those nasty Eastern Tibetans had caused him, through being so nasty, to meet his guru and achieve awakening. He made aspirations for their benefit, and as a result, if you look now, that most of the practitioners of Dzogchen are from Eastern Tibet. Lama didn't say whether they're nasty or not, but they're from Eastern Tibet. So that's the power of aspirations.
대리 달롱 지바라는 할레바리 대니 공게 란도도 냠니셀 값서 공 산제 뭐마도 의에나 냠니셀 값서도 공물처럼 소르네 대마지 제제가 나고라 고 제제가 나고라 공저도 땡진이면은 로 다와만 보면은 대 냠니셀은 조바친 본내로 담중마도 전는데 라마카텐지 그거런 란자데로 소라 공원에 전에 투이 이미든지 대니 인도도 공게 대니 다 yang pecha ta ta long chi ge de nyeng dai dan ze la so ba kong ge song chi de zam ne ka sa la ka so ma za tam so da ka pa won kan ro tam ji nyeng da kan ro ma tam ji nga so ma da man da wa na yi kong da ko ma da ma ge ja che ba na yi kan ro ma tam ji ngi so ne na zan da ya da dam jin la so ba na zan da ya da che thar zo ya da kyo zo ya de ma ge zo ko ma ri ko dun ju ge ji we chen bo so re da long chi ba se ya 대가 냠니 흉친 보조들이 깝지 조리데 마초게 대안하게 깝지데 니르 대저존에 줄로状态的 다나 마즈나 조바친 보내로세야 돼 도고는 가래 가오리 대인데 든르시나 마소 야보를 그래 오늘
When Longchenpa was receiving the heart essence teachings from his guru Kukuraja, he did so and practiced them under conditions of extreme austerity. For one thing, Kukuraja lived in an encampment, and they would move from one place to another, sometimes every day, and certainly frequently. And Longchenpa had almost no food. He lived primarily on medicinal pills.
Oh yeah.
And like Ratsayana. And he had basically only one garment possession, which was a sack. And he wore this sack as his clothing during the day and slept in it at night, and that's all he had. So he had no food and almost no clothes whatsoever, and achieved, of course, the great exhaustion, Dhamma. And then when he composed his writings, principally the 4 branches of the heart essence, of which there are 5, and his 7 treasuries, it said that the paper was brought to him and the ink mixed by the Dharma protectors of the Dzogchen teachings themselves and Dakinis, and that he experienced their company and presence as being as visible as we would see other human beings. And so it's due to his austerity and hard work that these teachings still exist. So we should take that, Lama said we should take his example of austerity and hard work to heart.
Oh, that's a daily. That didn't sound it. That didn't do on some Lama say the Ladop say the Lama say and those cups Lam Namta say the Hiko Hori. Then the Lama Gomatamji, Zoki Lama Tamji, the Loxorori, Lama Namjorta, Ladop, Lama or Hili cups, Lama Koma Tanjin Zipu can Namtarti, the states at the certain he called the Gares and the Sena Troa Jayada, Sena Pova Jayada, Soso Sena Tronhanta, Debatan Jev Tabri, Mato, Dega Chianas or Nanga, Nando, Nanga, not as make the Nanga, the Tronhaki, also Katsi Lama can Namtarta Santikina, Maso send bits of keep on the target on other day one day young Jondo.
It's traditional when you teach Guru Yoga practice, especially in the Dzogchen tradition, you're supposed to recount the stories of the deeds of great masters of the past. And the purpose of doing this is to inspire people. The students are supposed to be inspired and become enthusiastic and happy. It's not intended to be frightening or to intimidate you.
Okay, that in something so that so on that Niba Bezangar Chipotayari. Some Bezangar and Gorichak Ladok Niba one Bezangar Pima said the Honse. Then all Honse they call Sanjay Tamji Koi Movo on the Song of other Tukyum over Honri. Then the Chuka longer Truckusum over Zena Choko, because on Tukyum over Zena Choko. That day, Bezangur and Remredi, Hinsojagan Zegale, Tata Pim Kamalinga, Zawatan Rekela, Yori Tele Yapo, Tela Zena Chori, Kantaria, Koson told Lama Koson told and to call the Chukalonga Truckus on Henry. Then they take a son of checker in Bezan say attended, and Yorami Dorje la Kohole, Mexico, Dumba Dorje Deco, Semicum over the Kohole, and Bezangur and the Lama, Lama Semicum over in Guru. One Bezangar Piman, Gorokalada, and Gorokatsating, Piman June, say and Gorak and Merakalada, the Kochokari, they see me, but Ninji Chimbo, the Kochokari, Corona, the Jonjamau, Pimana, the Kona, Chokodri, Gandarian, Piman, said the home sit, say at it, and Chotomoni Jungut of the Zargo, also Gojate, Tina and Chokomut of Gori, and Lama get the Rungut of Zarochi, so the Bezangorate. Any some the duration of the so they can record it and do something. Then the bed Lama the take reported on sentient on the Jerem de Lama got a sentient on the then Bezangorate, Katsina, Dang Top. Then it did Dang Dijine and got Hula Tona Chorin, Yola Tona Chori, Bezangor, Hana Lama Jambu Tona Chorin, Bezangor, Gini Lama Jambu Tona Chori, Kaps, and the Lama Jambu say at the Hong Kong. Then also Barodoji Lama Jambu or Tendon. Then the Lama Jambu say at the Katsi Tona Yapori, Barodoji Lama Jambu Tona Chori, Control Lama Jambu Jebari, that's all Lama Jambu Jebati, and got a lot of so Saint of Lama Jambu, the so say called. Then the Zola and Jaraku Chimbori, then it then the Riven Bezangora the Katsi in a Sa, Lama Jambu, the Katsi in a Dom, that and go.
After the supplication, the small prince says, recite the Vajraguru mantra as a prayer. The Vajraguru mantra is the common 12-syllable mantra of Guru Rinpoche. It begins with Om Ah Hum, which represent the body, speech, and mind of all Buddhas, as well as the three kayas, the Nirmanakayas, Buddhakaya, and Dharmakaya. Vajra represents the unchanging nature of things. Guru is the Guru. Padma is Guru Padmakara's name, Padma. Siddhi means attainment, and Hum is an exhortation or appeal that he bestow the supreme and common attainments on you. So basically, this mantra can be seen as a prayer addressed to him by name. There is a great deal more to it, of course. If you want to know the details, there is an analysis and commentary on the mantra syllable by syllable that was given by Guru Rinpoche in response to a Yeshe Dzogchal's request, and was recovered as Terman by the Chitin Karma Lingpa. And it's commonly available in English translation. So you recite that as a prayer. And then the text says, it is excellent to call the Guru from afar. Now you can either do this, if you do it, you can either do this after reciting the Vajraguru mantra or before. Either way is acceptable. And as for the liturgy of calling the Gurus from afar that you use, you can either use the one by Terchen Barway Dorje and insert that here, or you can use there are many, but you can use the longer one by Jungul Lodritai, by Jungul Cont'd the Great, which is also excellent.
Re tanja gonga lama jambu de nga so san pe sage ka ni risma chi pa ga femis ra wo sin la dum nyam ni so sin ke ga ta de ha jang dong kri ta tin na thie ga ha jang ya bo lama jambu yin ba da thie tin na nga so de go jo nga so sem nga so ga nam to de nga so ga sem na ko ngo ne tra ne ke the ka de kon rwa yu pa ra ga ma bo tin na song.
The calling the Gurus from afar by Jungul Lodritai is very well known, and it's used by practitioners of all schools, the Kagyu, Nyingma, Sakya, and Gelug tradition. And it's a supplication to Gurus of all lineages, and also includes a great deal of instruction, and especially is phrased in such a way that it hits home.
Deri teni ngone trane nga so chuse ya de ke ta yang nga so tsewa go ni hi na lo ja de ka pin ka ma re chan so lo na tab de lo to ke tab de ha ko to ke go wa ko de teng sa ta translation pe ha le pa khle le je sa je ya se kan do tin na english de ya por hi na inji de te ka to go li to pa 부여에 너무 답되어로 야보데 태가르 축돈 고알이구나 할레바케게 베 상완들이 베반들 베 딥들이 있었네 고알이부터 리던들 망보요리 근데 인기데 파 책데 칭저 동전의 파 저반의 잡gel인도 고 답되어노 근데 저런서 디토니 로자와 탐지가 되게 보면 탑디르게 갑레오 사마리데 갑레 도큐데 gom tabik kabere charanso gom chada thokmada sa veda chola chada magosani ngudap chemorila rewa vedida samdo kodira ngara samno khorkando ta tepe hajang le kabe khawori ta che ngoma ke le da molam ja chembo sonam cho ja chembo sa chan ta sonam cho ja chembo sa chan ko ngone trane ke le de ta chi jole le jinje chazogo lama nuding ko lama renye na ta da che renye ka ko dan tru na sa pin to kare ma to yinda na tai sar ma gon na hal le pa ke sem de ju ta to ko mari din na ni gan de go re sin na nga chon de ni nyom mo dong nga ko wang de khok chen bo tang yu ko no ta te za tham zeng si nyom mo dong nga de wang de chira tang yi mari de la te sar chen ri ko ko de ducha cheta tomo ngaja thado kare na labartan ducha de khok chemore ke wa khalo jorgu gndo de lomba de pe layan na yere chibo de ducha de khok chemore ro gndo ducha khora go wa khora kare se na de de sa damje ma khora wa de che hyo hyo ducha de nyoma nyona khora lo yor ngi ba da lang lo ba da chin tan khora ge cha chama de mela zong ke ri ma to che ge gaya phi ta ka 마차 척과 침보서야데 송리 마차 척과 침보 누차데 동급되니 리 소소도 비히리 나와타이리 마차 척과 침보서야데 누차데 쩌다 상한 냠니 생기를 고리 누차 코라가 완데 콘 누차데 세바근 누차 코라근 누차가 완데 콘 누차 코라라만 완데 누차데 대봉어도 대동공어도 근데 저는 거 some don't matavarilla, ducha, Konawan the Choran Sotek Dankola. Chat some of the Choran Milazon get into Charlie. Then the Nagati Lodura chamber and so Muggan to Chad Hajan Kariri, Lodura chamber key na Drakado, 로중아 히야 유 로지 통통래 대인도 뇨몽바다 샤다 땅이 말이 뇨몽바데 대차례 코란은 참을 야네요
되네 로즈.
어리 로지데 다 가르르세나 나초 머렉 인도차 체 잡아데 로지데 가르르세나 나초 다다 소보 인이게 삼야바게 뭐바주 서야래요 요리 담주 뭐바주 세요 디나니 생직된 차처다 나게 매 접선로와 매 접선이 히어데 생직된데 요콩에 히크미라지 나마 좋아 접선데 나초 맞다 담보 인도 공부권도 잠보데 상마제나야 잠발라게 맞다 처처데 나초데 대지 흉침보 가르세나 나초도 소소가 랑고 우데게 로고 고함도 냐마고 다와고 우데 띵고 소소고 나라조 소소 삽타바데 님세메 소소가 하고 타바 그대지 사데를 야 요바다 좀 잠을 소소가 제도를 용천나 나초게 데바 쳔타바 초와 데이터바 들리게 가서 그마들 담보 오르와 가서 로아데 데니 도차 체를 손데 싹 담지라 때때니 초바도 데니 데라 때선 도차 체저 데니 도차 하장 체자도 데니 더소 파메와리 다 제고고리 손데 데니 루고 우 담제 냠바리 메와리 로고 르다 우유 바탐제 짜단당 유 바탐제 메와리 다 도로 제 손데 데니 디제니 먼초라 마무바이 로도리 제도 마무바이 로도데 제게데 다 마무바이 로도 데라 초아르 데디도 저거를 히라 레가 레고 하면 동가서 베데지우 데니 지네르도 마소 레시 제치리네 마바 로도 마부 켜쳐고 단 캬는 냐라베 사니 사자 나니 사자 다와 지막 사자 삼노타네 데니 마데 도차 체르서 데니 다소아메와 차선도 데니 도루 차는 가서 nd라오다 차거리 뇽몽바 도차도 촉체잖아 오늘 전에 대지도 주로 당도 그래.
Remember that when you study Dharma, reading a text once is not enough. Sometimes we can read something and we understand it. And this is all the more true now because there are both the Tibetan originals and many clear translations in various languages, such as English. And the translations are often even easier to understand than the original because when Tibetan is translated into polysyllabic languages like English, then often the translations will, to some extent, unpack the meanings embedded in the Tibetan. So there's no problem with your learning or understanding a Dharma. The problem is you won't practice. You won't practice, you don't practice. And if you don't practice, nothing's going to happen. Understanding Dharma, knowing Dharma, having read Dharma, doesn't do very much. What's more important than how much you learn, how much you understand, is that you meet a guru with whom you have a karmic connection, and then even one or two words out of their mouth might change your mind. Until that happens, it seems that basically nowadays, people just, no matter how much they understand, they let themselves fall under the power of the kleshas. They let themselves fall under the power of the 5 poisons. Especially because you live in an affluent society with a great deal of luxury. You live a little bit like gods. And like gods, you have an unlimited amount of attachment and craving and desire. No matter what it is, you can never get enough of it. And we need to question this. Of course, we use phrases in the Vajrayana teachings like great desire without attachment, referring to the Buddha, Amitabha, and so on. But that's not the same thing as the klesha of desire, because our desire is destructive. We find this explained in the Buddha's teachings of the Abhidhamma. For example, in Vasubandhu's Abhidhamma Kosha, there is an explanation of the development of human life on this planet, and how there has been a steady degeneration of our mental and physical state as a result of our lack of contentment. It's said that human beings first settled on this planet when we came from a deva realm that's called luminous or luminosity. And as that name implies, the first human beings were luminous, had their own light, didn't need to rely upon the light of the sun or moon, and didn't need to eat. And then eventually somebody noticed that there was grease on the ground, kind of a grease it would be like a vegetable fat. And they put it in their mouth and it tasted good to them. So then it became the fashion, you eat this, it's fun. Well, of course, once people started eating that grease that they found on the ground, then they came to depend on it. And as they ate the grease, their bodies coarsened, and the light that their bodies radiated disappeared. And that's when the sun and the moon are said to have appeared. And then the next thing was that people while they were eating that grease, then they noticed that there was this stuff, basically what we would call corn, that just appeared, that nobody had to grow, and that you could eat. And so somebody started eating corn, and then they caught on, and then pretty soon everybody was eating corn. Now, they didn't grow the corn, they didn't farm, they didn't have to do anything. And there was plenty for everyone. But at some point, somebody had the bright idea of storing it. Because you never know, you might run out. So hoarding was invented. And somebody invented hoarding, and it just went on from there. And it gets worse and worse and worse. He stopped there, which is nice, because he hasn't got to the origins of all sorts of things that led us to, in this way. But you can read this. If you read the Abhidharma Kosha has been translated. There are lots and lots of things you can read about this. This story is told also in the first volume of the Treasury of Knowledge, and which we have in the library. It's repeated many times, and it starts with these beings who don't need anything and are totally luminous, and it ends up with this, and they're killing, and then of course every time we do something stupid, it shortens the lifespan. Like killing and stealing and lying, and then Anyway, that's in the Abhidharma Kosha.
Lots of daily. Then,
so then now we can have questions.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow we'll finish the
Yes.
this.
Totally, your board has course can answer. Good. Yeah. Anyone? And online? On computer?
Is someone going to ask the questions from online?
Well, if there's a microphone, we don't have a microphone, but if anybody wants to.
I could just ask
Loudly.
one more time.
Yeah, do you have a question? Do you want? But then Lama has to
Yeah,
respond.
microphone. Microphone mean
That was my question. Do you want to float this around?
Well, no, because then Lama has to respond.
Okay, gotcha.
Next question.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Supplication. You explained it today, but the supplications still seem to be general. And accomplish the path and these blessings. Is there supplications that are more specific, that are valuable? Or these little jobs that you want to get done, you want help with, is that just kind of ego claiming or fixation? Can you explain supplication? I have a hard time with supplication, asking for help from the Buddhas. I'm comfortable with making aspiration prayers.
So that Nijung Chiatam, Lam Driatam, Lam Jidrebu, Yunten Chiaki, so that Chichapki, so that so that some of the Lam Chichapki, Yana Mixelki, so that Yinji Chiaki, so that it's okay. Mixel, so that we are your face.
They you some that they call Tibak goes on the love younger cups and the love young mixer of the quality, somebody Chia or Chipo and water, Chia, Chazogolo, Gonzop Sancho, Sam Kona, he Galika, and the Chimbo Yori, Garilla, Mikisonum gets Chipo, the sum of Dan, the Richard and other young Tabaka. So Topgyal Yori. Then I know Yatang Congressong Yardazo Bay take Tombori, no about the Correct Tombori, and a Congressong Yon said the Lamji Ramba Chatsamari, Tina Sangdi, take Manyo Kare, the Dino Lamji Salam Yamba Chatsama Sangdi, Bay Yabondo, that then you than you, that they go you than you.
Well, there are supplications that focus on particular types of development, such as the development of compassion, which is a supplication that might arise in mind training context, or a supplication for being able to accumulate merit, and so on. This supplication, as you mentioned in your question, is general in the sense that it deals with the entire path. It's a supplication to be able to generate every attribute of the path, starting with recognition of impermanence and all the way up to the end. And in that sense is characteristic of the compositions of Terchen Barway Dorje, which tend to both be all-encompassing and also somewhat elevated in their language. Is that what you're asking? Or are you asking about the validity of supplication per se?
That was a good answer, but I'm still asking about things more specific that might be mundane. Can I get help getting through this project?
The nekaps the chingin dopa the lega zombo yoyak so that the
Soratan and ready, they soratan and red and red, that love younger cups and younger Mojig song or Lama Yanta were to give it in it, Modala Single love to something just on Chip, same shepherd you that you were single love swords on the sword, take Chipon, then the Lama Wangelin, 삼행기 때 쪼고 끈적고 삼적고 셈 쪼wen 희가들이 동다 삼적고 셈 샤정 인저리데 쪼던데 조바 쳔보가 돌라마양다 버용 게비키니 쳔보 달라만 거센젤라도서 사람제 똑바 쳐버지 줄다 쳐버센젤라도 소로도 똑바 코나 태가도 소로데 거들이 되네 된다데 쳔제 되네 된다 인다 교랑게 직티 투몽게 무럽 쪼거나 투몽게 무럽 쪼고 치다 되네 거 소로 가레tam나 나랑게 생근 더바져야 조 생근 더바져야 나서 송들이 추나 탐지 진다 더바셀라라더네세 생근 더바져야 데라하고 더나 되니 나랑 뭐나 가레tam나 이근데 초커로와 된 다다레 지밀링바게 데 손데 모남나나 오르와 데데 코로 탐이 사와도 정도도 매었다고 돈을 렘데도 이치 버신게 랍도 소르존 소란데 거들이 로도 나게 유는 나마 촉지 유도 버신게 랍도 소르존 다 대라데 진짜 손데 나랑게 셈나니 삼도 맞여야로
You can pray for anything good. So we see that there are prayers that are structured that way. Like, for example, Jung Rudra says in the context of mind training, you can pray, "O pure spiritual friend, please grant your blessing that authentic love, compassion, and bodhicitta arise in me." Or in the context of Dzogchen practice, "Please grant your blessing that realization of the profound path arise in me," and so on. But we can extrapolate from that, Lama said, and so yes, you can pray for mundane benefits. It primarily depends upon your intention. It's what you are focused on in your mind that you're really praying for. It's the actual words you use are less significant than what your mind is actually focused on. And so therefore, if you're focused on overcoming some particular situation or success in some particular situation, that's okay. For example, in Jigme Lingpa's aspiration prayer, it says, "May in every lifetime I recognize that samsara is like a pit of fire, a thicket of razors," and so on.
대나 우리 남부추의 거양 대나 상하의 거양 대라 삼노 땅히 거면 무슨 또 스페시픽 삼노 땅은 남의 조르죠 소 가레스는 게 생기는 누체메지 피다마도 누체메지 삼제가 저 대로와 가서 따와 잭대리 되는 따와 저 대리마도 인담이 모놈 가레 야야다 나로 그 장이 저 모놈 가레 야야다 aspiration 가레 세야다 손도 가레 세야데 소소 그 생나니 건도 바견 제기도 삼노 땅 라마다 소라담 라마다 스페시픽 초라나 톡대 바로 요 말이 초라 가레 더바데 데 드롭 타바이가 라마 상제서야 되게 심진라 강 더바데 네 드롭 타바르게 삼노 대당 거들이 데 상제게 송어와 심진 거자마도 바 여러지바 쳔어 쳔제가래 오리다 심진 거버세바마도 심진라 가레 거다 데트야마도 제게 인가래 까미 송데 상제게 대 송어로 데 오펜 인다 출론라고 말이 남부추를 오펜으로 겹친거를 데 따때 강다량 상담을 통고 무슨도 없으니까.
We should remember that Buddha's teachings, and including the Vajrayana, are very wide open. We sometimes tend to have a very narrow focus, and so therefore we kind of project our own narrow focus onto the teachings. But the teachings don't have a narrow focus, and they're not narrow-minded. Basically, as long as our aspiration is to help beings, and if not, at least to never harm them, then any aspiration we make, any supplication we make is valid. When you pray, you're praying to the Guru and to Buddhas, and Buddhas have no narrow focus. Their only intention is to please beings. That's why they say the only way to please Buddhas is by pleasing sentient beings. So therefore, Buddhas want every being to have everything they want. So therefore you can pray for anything that is not wrong.
You are right.
Who's next?
Next, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for these.
You are right.
I have a question about the relation, how to view the guru in the generation stage practice, in Yidam practice. So, as you know, I do the Ratna Linkpa Kila. So you imagine the Om Aham coming down from gurus and Buddhas and into you. And I have trouble negotiating a sense of divine pride and a sense of supplication at the same time. And I think that's just because I'm a beginner at it, but if you could just speak some words of advice.
That has a lot. Railing the Purba Demic, the not so good. Something Purba Dowry, the Chojo Deshin Shepa Tamchela Chopone, Kosan took Jinot Sante, Home Sum de number, Round the Sissit and Bagay, Jinot doing a bit by Yopana, Conge, Laya Tatu. They are not so good, some not also the number chicken, so run flat, these cups of Dorje Shunu in a lot, yen sambake, lying not a bogedo. Yanaya. Deshin Shepa Tamchela so what up dig Jena Togiges. The Kandaya, the number chickena run Yuntin Zopa Sanjela, number chickena run Yuntin Zop Nimba, Dana and Sanjay Jena Shugo Bucket. Kandalish.
That is Sarbori. Naso Yesang Yebari, Yansang Yeb. Lama Yadam Yer, Mebari, the Sora Tam, the Kosonto Salat and Aso the Huna. The Narang Yadam Ri, Yedoman Naran Yadam Ri. Yadam reading also church Harvard, not on church and also Yadam Lama Yadatam, you can kids in Nusam Jidani, the Naso the Yedoman Yori, and also the Tata de Jets Harvard. Then the Dani Zab flat gone, then Yadam Lama the Yadam Yerme Barilla. Samotan, then it go Salatan with a cuna, take a career pinkorsina. Narang same dela, Danja Lama Yadam, Samotan the same day. Yerme, connecting. Lama told the Nazo same day, Joan Yell Pachabio. Naka rattling yelling in the Japa Simjitam, Chabio. Then they connecting zone, the Nubate. Ngaran Matem, Naranga Tata Jude, Yomaba, there's a Jabdi Ori, Yomaba, the Hinga, the Jorto or Maripa, Jabdi Ori, De Patsamazon, Pachatam, Pasandon, Yadam Plata, Lama, Yemi Bare, then Dawing or Chandra, then you go tap Deni the Dane on the Koran, then we drop the Yodo, the Naran Sangpa Majeka, I thought the Sangame, the Dedo Soranda. Then they partner the major they said,
The attitude with which one does this sort of thing is that one's nature is primordially Buddha, primordially awakened, but needs to be reawakened. So they say Buddha from the beginning, but requires reawakening. So basically, it's valid to think of yourself as Vajrakumara because that is your nature. Within your nature, you do possess all of the attributes of Vajrakumara, but you don't perceive them directly. So you pray to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, including the deity in front, in order that their blessing reawaken you to your own qualities. So even though you're thinking that you, as the deity, are inseparable from the guru, you could also visualize the deity and guru inseparable in the sky before you. And it's not that the one of these is you and the other is not you. They're both your mind, because your mind is all pervasive. So even the guru in the sky before you is still your own mind, not separate from your mind. So ultimately, it's your own mind blessing your own mind. But the reason that we need this is that although we innately possess all the attributes of Buddhahood, we're still suffering. We still have kleshas. We're still obscured as to our own true nature.
Ngarang yadang gla, ngone yadang gla da, ngarang zobo da ko ngone yadang jikyang kore, ngarang zane tamji de yadang gla, kyankam yongsu soba de, ndene cha de yoba de, yiji yoba de, pe ke chimore, dambo de yiji yoba de ngo hiba de dong to ma, deni remje de la yiji sine gomne, la da lama yermi de, lama sanap da da yermi ba, re la samno yang 동네 먹게고 박차된 요 뭐지네 디 박차의 양양 요도 초라가 사다 예담 사다 라마의 열매 방어의 견도도 되니 초라 나님 시 코리오 치수니 그 잡기를 초라가 내가 된 거죠 자네는 초라 뇨모 또 봐서래 잡아 니니见呀 요마 이 신관의 견도 거들이 대지의 덴바마도 동하는 요마 서적의 보더서 또 서적의 경계 잡다마 다 디값을 되니 초라 그거 교고 그거 쳐다 톱차 마대 마탑이 빠르다 그거
We begin Yidam practice as a matter of belief, and it's important to believe. For the Yidam practice to be effective, we have to believe I am the deity. All these boundless realms of this deity are present within my channels, within my body as the deity. All of these things are really there. But while you believe that, you haven't realized them. You don't experience them. It's a matter of belief, not direct experience. As long as it's still a matter of belief, we need to receive blessings and siddhi from the Guru, from the deities, separate from ourselves. And as we do so, the initial belief that you are the deity will ripen into a certainty and direct experience. And what's happening during that process is that the good habit of seeing your true nature is beginning to overpower or overcome the bad habit that we all have of seeing ourselves as impure. And as long as anything can still bother us, we still need to receive blessings. We still need to request the siddhi. When you've gained perfect siddhi, then there is only happiness. Nothing will bother you.
Te na pinche data telopa ke naropa da songdo. Naropa telopa de koran ke chazoglo donda ha ko chawari telopa. Yena daron telopa ke yangja naropa da songro. Bo jiwa me ba ma do ba. 错你行动旁路的，你这玩嘛是哪路吧？说呢？错你行动旁路就行到个跑路，你没能找到过嘛？人没去说那个错的，没一个错你，像那几万没不懂的，马多就跑的，但是这玩嘛的，这玩嘛是哪路吧？送多，但是俺说但是国际去抓嘛的，人几万没把谁呀的懂得多呢？搞说的，像那间接个东方的赚呢，像那上级谁呀的个产的了。 ngangja zawa ni ne mewa de komza no modam no se ore la se sam jekya ngangja mi so di ka so de to sa se ba som jiktin de woro de pan jek so na chora se no ngangja do zawa ni ni yo ma re ba cha wa re la de do ko chona de la ji yo ma de de mental problem re so ma re da sang ge so se sam jekya ngangja mi do yong ga de cha kwa mi de ma re ko da darong da da so ni king de pa no de so ge Lama nung rukya da sonam ge chosa ya da de ko de chaz go.
For example, Tilopa advised Naropa quite late in Naropa's training, said to him, until you realize the unborn nature of all things, Naropa, never be without or separate yourself from the the two wheels of accumulation. The two wheels of accumulation are the accumulation of the steady accumulation of merit and the steady accumulation of wisdom. And the function that they perform together is like a chariot or car with two wheels. It won't work if there's only one wheel. And so his point is that until you gain final realization of the unborn nature, you're still subject to conditions. So there still needs to be more merit and more wisdom. So we keep on receiving blessings and receiving siddhi and praying for blessings until we gain the state described in the aspiration of Samantabhadra, which says, even if attacked by the threefold world, you will feel no fear nor attachment to anything that appears. And this is not describing a state of mental illness where you can't perceive the threefold world attacking you. It means that you have nothing to fear, you are unassailable.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a question. So, the representation of the lion throne, the lotus, the sun, and the moon as the purification of prana, wind, chakra and channels, and the five elements. That is from the imagery of the relative truth aspect, right? Because we're generating it. That's not my question. Let me just speak freely without overthinking it. So is the purification process happening as a result of imagining this, or is this a multi-pronged thing? Is it the guru's blessings of the peace of Dharmata? Are there many things happening at the same time that's making this purification possible? Like, because that's a lot.
The Lama ge sombare, Chidonso Denji Lama gombe kapsa yena, Dene Sengchi de da Lama da Pasingachi Kama, Ito Tana, Melila Truk Neredwa, Degi, De gombe kapsa, De gomba la tene, Degi, Dakpa Dremba la tene, De Rangi de Zalong Digle, De Neso Dapa ki Tendo Dik Program is Kandra.
Tela tiene temrene koro, temre luda drink to was in the charzo. Tela debatana yichiri sin, monamtan zeke the tela yichi sigana. Tela tine go temre drink, go so the simulati tobate karakali jeko, they go temre.
Well, it works through interdependence, basically by recognizing the meaning of the Guru's, in the example you gave of the Guru's throne, as representing his having purified those things. It establishes the interdependence for you to purify those things. It causes that, it brings it about. And the way this is traditionally said is by establishing interdependence in your body, realization will arise in your mind.
Tanto so the Yonsata, Zorango Cornan, Yonkodri, Nasota, Yamni Katsi, Tokyo made the Mekete, the Jeran, the Zoran Zowachimbo, the Shukchimbo, so he you call the Matsama, Tateko, and the Wachimbo Yori, and he you call the Hamara, and the so take the so the letter he chodik. Long so some he chose the Yomari Loma needed similar that they nani shut the net and never Loma, the shut the net, Yamni, only take to see some Kirimato, Jagatical, certain helical, certain Yomari. Tanga thought Tama, Tamio, Pagino, Delenda, he can't nobody, he said nobody, Chazan, Yotadu, then it died Yamnika, you will make it Jezo Kingo Chazada, he you got and it. Then the Yamni see Tamna Yapori, Sema Tamna Choranso de Pachari on a Pinto Ori, then it so take the sola Katsina, Lotasi Masona, then it and the song Aragana, the two songs, some near Gawa Pro Yuna, Di Pachayo, Galega Pinto.
The reference being made here in assigning those correspondences to those relatively common symbols of the throne. The reference, of course, is to the aspects of the completion stage. And the idea here is that we become familiar with the terminology and the frames of reference of the generation stage, completion stage, and the great perfection, whether we practice them or not. So this means that this familiarity with these things is good, even if we don't practice, because it establishes a habit, a positive habit or a positive connection. In the past, teachers didn't speak openly about the symbology, or symbolism even of the completion stage. But now we've all gone mad, he said. Father's mad, the children are mad, everyone's mad. One's madder than the other. So now we're all crazy already, so we might as well just tell the truth. So one of two things will happen. Hearing about these things will inspire you to practice the completion stage, which is the best outcome. At the very least, hearing about them will create a positive attitude in your mind toward the completion stage, which is also a good outcome. The only problem is if someone hears this and thinks that's awful, that's yucky, that's nasty, then that's no good. But aside from that, it's fine.
But the purification is from the interdependence.
That's what he said.
Okay, and also negative thinking is supposed to be less, right? When you create this.
Dona de la lockdown shona degere.
Lockdown ma da ya bori dong da chia zai de da lo sang ha ge da jie zhou ge zhou ren de zhou kin ko de da ka si na lockdown ma xiao si ta na ya bori de ko ran ze sem na pa cha ko de ge pa cha de.
The most important thing when hearing anything about the Vajrayana, including the completion stage, great perfection, and so on, is not to give rise to antipathy. Because as long as there's no antipathy, even if your attitude is pretty basic, you're still making a positive connection because you're hearing something virtuous. And even if it's not completely understood, there's still goodness or virtue in hearing it.
Then the ngaran ke charan so the pin da sam ba mu nu chi sam ba yo ma re ngaran re wa che hyu re da sang ha la lo da si ni ma ri zo je de lo charan so la ta re wa che hyu te yu te ka chi ki de na tu do ri charan so sen na pa cha yo ro de ri ka che na ma ge wa ke ja chi conversation ma ge wa ke ja da ni ke ja chi de ti pa cha yo ro de na ya za ma zo ma to ni yo ko re nga so den jikting kan tam na so na wa pa te pa pa re ye so che ben chin da de ma san je ge jikting je tam na so pang ne sa je ge si sa bu sam je za ni ke ke o de den jikting ge tam na so de nga ra na te sa pang na sa ni sam no tang ke yo de nga re ge sam de what wrong with you zone de na wrong ka ma re de nge de la de sa zab zab in ko de then ga re ka la dong ba ta no what wrong with you this time are you okay though nothing wrong but something wrong with the jikting tam na so te sa jang ring ko se ya de sam no me tang ko de then the charan ti pa kha de yo ma jo na ka ro pa kha ni ma ka chi ne ja ma yo na ka ro pa kha sam bo de yong ro bi ta chu chek de yong ro bi ta se de ni ka le yo bo ri ro
I'm trying to help and not harm, which means that the things that I share with you, I share in the hopes that they'll be of some use to you in one way or another. And then at the very least, they won't harm you. And so in that connection, as long as a person doesn't develop antipathy toward anything they hear about Dharma, including the Vajrayana, then it becomes simply hearing it is a cause of their future liberation. So therefore, it's worthwhile exposing people to it. But we have to take into account the converse of that, which is that if hearing about these profound things is conducive to liberation, then it is also true that worldly conversation that increases our kleshas is a cause of lower migrations and of continued samsara. It's not neutral. We tend to think that our mundane worldly conversations are neutral, as though we're taking a karma-free moment or something. There is no such thing as a karma-free moment. It's not neutral. What we think of as neutral conversation is negative. It is as negative as a dharmic speech is positive. So, and people get upset with me sometimes. I've noticed that I don't want to take part in that kind of conversation, and they say, "What's wrong with you?" And I want to say, there's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with the mundane conversation. If we study the attributes or qualities of a Buddha, each of the marks and signs and other attributes is often correlated, particularly in the sutras, with causal virtues, specific things that Buddha did in previous life. And one of the main ones is abandoning all that crap, abandoning all that mundane conversation.
Yes, oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the teaching, Lama. So it's my understanding that even if a Buddha or a teacher makes a connection that is seemingly negative in the moment. So say, for example, you talk about Vajrayana and the person developed antipathy. But that is still, it's better to have the connection than to not have the connection. Is that not true? So that they say that if a Buddha makes if you try to kill a Buddha, they've got you, basically, right?
Yeah, they go there. What is Zangder?
Korangishiate the Ganzak is under the Sangak, the Chedonsa Sangak, the Kor Soyak, Korel, Sangak, Kor Sona, then Lokta Mashona, Chudron Sons. Lokta Shona, Pembayo Mari, Spena, Nekaps Ganzak, the Pepe Ganzak, the Lokta Shona, Pula. Droga Saban Shagamaris.
They then chokeri. They da tapio keja hitar. So Zabzok Kimbo Maveli keja. Naranawaka keja. Re Sangaseria de la new Yandro, Mandro, and Rosa Sumba Misong. The Lokta Jin, Tamsenyan, so Sangala, Dorjinia was Jeria. Then it ain't that Lehawaya, Tarkamania, Gable Kawayo. Lehau Tarkamari. That Hersea, he do Mambo Nawa Rokamari, Sanghasria, then Lokta Jena, Zanger Tsejekta, Ninjan Kora Tajin to hear go there, they are the true. Read the Zanger Ninjan the Katina, Yoma Soma, they Rima Soma, be careful of it. Kasi goes on that, go Nimatina, Trolli, the Yori, the Sangaki Chivari.
Yes, what you said is true, but if someone hears the Vajrayana teachings, and if you ask the question, is hearing the Vajrayana teachings and developing antipathy toward them not still a cause of that being's final liberation? The answer, strictly speaking, is yes, it is a cause, but it's a very, very distant cause. And this brings us, Lama said, into a very sad topic, because if someone hears Vajrayana and develops antipathy toward it, they will be reborn in Vajra hell. Vajra hell is not everlasting. They will eventually it's in some far distant period of time, get out. And then they will eventually, in some far distant period of time, achieve liberation. That is, as you indicated in your question, a special feature of Vajrayana. But it's a very, very dangerous situation. And it is, Lama said, it's very, very careless, heedless, and in a sense, unscrupulous to think that way. Because if you expose people who are likely to give rise to antipathy to the Vajrayana teachings, to it, you are exposing them to the danger of Vajrayana.
But as a follow-up then, because all of this material is now, as you've indicated, Yeshe, several times during our teachings, widely disseminated. There's all kinds of stuff out there, good and bad, and appropriate and not appropriate. And because we as Westerners do tend to try to do our own research, I'm not talking about myself personally, but if people already have developed some kind of a wrong view, and they say, oh, you're a Tibetan Buddhist, you must know blah, 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 blah.
Well, there's a difference between antipathy and wrong view in the sense that incorrect, by wrong view, do you mean incorrect understanding or antipathy?
Right. I guess usually it's more wrong view than antipathy, but it could be either one, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what's your question?
So the question is, it's not my job to fix anybody else's understanding of what things are. And I can refer them to the people that I know and trust, right? So I can say, well, that's not something that I could help you with, but if you're very interested in the topic, these are some people that I know and trust, and send them in that direction. Like teachers that I trust or resources.
But I guess
trust.
I don't understand how that relates to what you're just saying what to do if you encounter someone who has developed a fundamental misunderstanding of the Vajrayana teachings. I mean, what is your responsibility?
There does seem to be a lot of discussion, and sometimes it's better not to say anything at all, and I don't.
Okay.
Tate nge ha sapo koma te mawa na diksari che koma wanga na sapo ngeram do. And sangha ke gyuti na song res. Sangha sanghi sawa de chula kyonyo ma de sangha lokta ji na sang se ya ro re. Tate la zangzhen ni de ni ka na dekari sangha de hi ko de re na ti gyu na ti tsek de garab dorje koma ba ti tsek de yama ya cho ma re de ndu. Tate la dorna Daily, then Sangha Seriatella, Gyamtso, Sangha, Tamsik Seriatella, they are Logan Zon, Tamsik Seriat, there's a song to Gina, Kochali, so Kochana Giri. Sangha, Lazab Tamsenga, the Yinaka Tamselas of Mambori, then the Yinaka Tamsik, so the Sona, Nipa, Sona Pino Chonri, the Masona Nipa Chonri. Sab Tamsenga, the Chayogona, Monetan, Lami, Mapan Lama Girl. Yanda Lam the Hola Sam had such a Germany, some don't Tamsa Sayati Cortella, Pizza Chimo Hiori, then the some don't Tamsa Sayatina, the Sangoya Gyamtso Mambo Yori, then the Nazo Tata Re Nazo Chibando, the Dilomba de la Pe, Topgyal, Gavora, then some Chonanga Yadamla Karen Zesondra, Choranga Lama Karen Zesondra, Yadamla so Joku Zesondra, Choran Sam Kana Doku second, Chorang Nimba Katsi Goku second, Dragado, they Lima Jamna, that's okay, you don't like Chami Lam, and what Charanga Mahin and Drakari Love, they Mahin Magic, but the Richik Mari, the Koran the Tela, Monetranic, Pamsed Sunzara Yori, they cheat the Dene, they cheat and Torn Dorna, Sozoke. Zeta Chupa Zeta Dorje Travi, Mother Team around Song, Tamsik Chimbo Kio, Tata Tamse Satra Te, Ju Te, Nim Ju Te. That's all Gupa Gyamtso when he was Gupa Gyamtso Mina, Te He Guamar.
Kongi Laya did. Kongi Laya did. They song Sanga the Kasaka, the Kasaka, Tranzai. The Natsuke Palmalaya, also. Sushin Magos and the Damada Mogonyo. They in the Detsoke, Sola, or Cheronzo, Bishi, Namba, Jesu Jopares, Cheronzo, did and did, Zobiores. The Consoke, so Lama. The Rangi de Pala the Rigidex. Narang did so Nishes. The Lama did and did la Kajin Shunagas. Narang Kayan Shigi Me, la Rigidex. Pala Jaka Keshamari, Java, Surla.
Ticket the Yapo, the ten and Jakari, and a Koranzo Sahal and Dera La Chimi, Magas Sahage, Chute Mambo on Turkejaki, Kuniba Chonkari. Koranzo Dera Choma, Nagasahag Chunyani, Sigo, Lama Kela, Matanki, or Mawanko, then the tail and Niba Iko Yomari. Then the Kari, Narankan, she can be, Toranga Lama Teda Tela Tila Yapo, Yorisana. They pay your body. Chorang chin, Yamni, the person, they will not lay down the choker, Lee Sujam the choker, for the more Chepar Yomari. Then Naranke, Tubatam Yamato, Yamni, Maranakaya Mewain, Malay Jaya Dela, Natson, and there's a Boba Chunchoni, Kale, Chokchimbo, they pay your body, they are body.
Well, first, before I translated your question, Lama answered it one way, and then when I translated your question, he answered it in a different way. So we'll go with the one he answered when he. Well, you may want both, but you're going to get one. Because his all right, I'll give you the other one too. But what he said was that yes, if someone who has read about the Vajrayana approaches you and asks you questions about it, then it's an excellent answer to say, well, I don't know about that, but you can go to Lama so-and-so or so-and-so who can explain these things to you. And the other thing he said about that was, also an answer to the translated question, was that the danger for the person is actually not that great. If they don't have formal, if they haven't received Vajrayana formally, they haven't received empowerment, they don't have samaya vows, they don't have anything to break. So they're actually, you don't have to worry that much about them. They're not in great danger from what they've read. The problem is when people develop antipathy on the base after receiving empowerment and vows. That's when there is great danger. And then, since you wanted what he said when before I translated is, are you sure?
Yeah.
Because it can't be taken back.
I want to hear it.
All right. The problem is you have no understanding whatsoever of Samaya. You've never studied it. You've never understood it. You have no basis of basic understanding of the root samayas, such as never to abandon the guru, never to abandon the deity, and never to speak of secrecy. The fact that you're asking this question indicates that you are too open in speaking about Vajrayana. That's why you get into these conversations. And so the whole context indicates that you are fundamentally, we would say, out to lunch.
So
And I'm not done yet. You
Okay,
asked for
go
it, let me
ahead.
finish.
I want to finish.
Well, I'm sure you do. So don't forget that in the Tantras, and especially in the Nyingma teachings, the Samayas are very, very strict. You're not even supposed to let people who have not received empowerment see a Vajra and bell. That's a violation. What you're talking about, conversing about whatever you get into conversations about with other people, is way beyond that.
So let me just go back and specify what I'm talking about, which is people that have been in the same room and received the same empowerments that I have, who then want to have a conversation about what is and isn't appropriate about what's happening. And I'm saying,
I'm sorry, what do you mean by isn't appropriate about what's happening? You mean about the empowerment? I don't understand what you're getting at.
my understanding is that the people in the room who
Mhm.
have received the same empowerment from the same teacher have the same samaya.
Mm-hmm.
Am I mistaken?
I don't understand about what you mean by appropriate, though.
Never mind, it's not a public question. I'll ask it later, thank you.
这种说的是这个，没怎么给Lama 这个
王须子，
王须传的，当这这个吧。
这当这结果
Yeah.，
这确实你们当这里才是多进结果。
No, you're correct. You're understanding that when people receive the same empowerment at the same time from the same guru, that they have the same samaya. That's true.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Thank you, I got it.
年娃的人娃的，确实年娃的些高的，娃的经过这个电车，确实年娃个多进结果，节目里查的了，还讲那讲说个咋节目在过里头。
Yeah, and in fact, in terms of the proximity of samaya or the intimacy of samaya, there are gradations. So when people receive the same empowerment from the same guru at the same time, that is the closest possible proximity.
Yeah.
I have a question about renunciation because I get confused because there's a lot of hurt everywhere. And sometimes I worry that me saying, I know it's not going to work out, the only thing I can do is practice, is in some way selfish because it's ignoring what people are going through now, even though like we might have different understandings or we, you know, like I feel like it's selfish of me to separate myself from people who need help that I could give them right now, even if it's not to supreme liberation.
Okay. 这东西你就给扩了，但拿这个让这个给考试样，所的Gyamtso了课这个问题是，因为内考是的他们做这个，偏那个就没人是。
대 핀다고를 가르치는 나서 이제 띵게 다다 칸네 요도 몸바상 생기도 조 첨보인 송데 몸바상 생기도 좀바 파라도 선바 돌아 람 랍거나 가래 카고 대사리 요리 gem반데 좀 처럼 좀 봐좀데 왜거나 또다 가래 오리데 몸바상 생다 내가 같이 있는 생기는 누체 세마 핀다 탐나 군접상 생로다 되게 핀바마도 누체요 말이 될라 소제게 가과 요 말이 소제 가서 특바 첨보 남는 정도 되리 대인도 산지에게 살보송데 yar보 싸잖아 산지 혁야도 밖에 yar보다 담배 도저도 우리 디나는 살보송데 단트란 말이 수트란 가레스는 yar보 첨보 계란 콜방 중요하다 가래 배 딜라 첨보를 있어 초랑 뭐 요바상 샘나 라바라 로거나 대사를 딜라 첨보 가래 카보리스 얘는 초랑 몸바상 샘기도 검나 초랑 송나야라 데나야라 드레나야라 라나야라 히나야라 초랑 그 코탐지리 강다야 초랑 몸바상 샘기데 지마죠 대기고 초랑 초 데라티네 촌 타토 상계로들이 상계가 송으로 왔다 대패 돈 신이 특반 함께 개진 거리도
Of course you should help them if you can. It's not, part of the problem is the English word renunciation, which I guess I was still using then. Now, most of us say the determination to be free. Because renunciation does have an unfortunate connotation of kind of like leaving people in the dust. And it doesn't mean that. The idea is that we have to accept that at any given moment we have limitations in what we can do. So as ordinary people, we're principally cultivating aspiration bodhicitta. And our implementation bodhicitta, our actual practice of the 6 perfections, is not perfect. And that's okay. The point of the determination to be free here is not that we shouldn't try, it's that we should accept the fact that we can't always help. But should we help when we can? Of course. Of course. And the Buddha said this when he was teaching King, I think it's in Visara, said, "Great King, you're very busy with your court and your subjects and everything. So you don't try to practice every aspect of implementation bodhicitta. Focus on aspiration bodhicitta. And if you can cultivate that in every moment, then that alone is enough to bring you to a future Buddha." So it's not that we shouldn't help, it's just that we have to maintain the aspiration to do more than we can right now.
There that the bed kitchen, dinner, and Tipa Chimbo, Chudela, Timi Jojo, Mata, Tipa Sonka, and Garmit goes on the Sanjek, Jek Kesarway, Maton, Garmit or Sanjek Songa, Tsedi. My same candle, Tobacco, and Chuhi Yada, so same Hankari, Tonka than the D land in Yamsalon, Yinda de la Gabamaja, Nutsemazi, Jakan dog, Mado. I like, I don't like Mazo. So same Kari, talking on the Sanjay Chu, Tiparamaco, and he got the Tipa Chungada, Tipa Chimbo, Sanga, same Kari, talking on the Danyam Chindo, Halepa the Yapori, Dina and Tatak to the same kind, may same kind of take out and turn the Pentagona, Gunzo Sanjay sent it. Halepa Pinkery, Donda Sanjay sent the Pinkery, Yaneda Lamton Gona, Nazo Sendela, Markham Down, Chaya or the Donda Sanjok sent the Pinkery, Gonzo Sanjok sent the Hajan Pinkery. Then the big kitchen in Sari Sankayu. Then the Chuja Tomorrow was the Pega Teddy Song, the Nagate, Ditsela, Kong Monetan, Mount Dindy, the artist. Kong Tipar Rambasonga Songa, Nituni, Mahayani, and Mahayanani, Sanga Songa the song, the Konchen the Peppa, the Tato Sanga song. And a Tato Konchen the Pekka della, you are America. Never forget Hinayana library system. Do not be Toronto. Need to get about Jima Josie. The Toronto correct long song get the drink. Yatapa Chembota, Sahaganyamni, Sit Samari, the Kantaya, Timini, Yakompa, Pudina, Dilomba, the Gasari, Saniraka. Coral experience when the song get the something around Semna, Jes, one Jes. Don't get those on little, okay, Lama Saporo.
We need to understand that the process of the various Buddhist vehicles is not one where each one contradicts those that precede it. It's greater and greater clarity and greater precision. So it's not the case that the Mahayana teachings negate or contradict the teachings of the common vehicle, or sometimes called Hinayana. Nor is it the case that the Vajrayana teachings in any way negate or contradict the teachings of the Mahayana or Hinayana. So when thinking about Dharma ourselves and when discussing it with others, there's no need to refute someone else's idea of what a Dharma is. We shouldn't say, I like this, I don't like that. Because each of the Buddha's teachings is designed for a certain mindset. And whatever suits that person's mindset is going to be more beneficial for them than what you might think would suit their mindset. I don't know what this has to do with your question, but anyway, it's what he said. But principally, I think that what is, of the generally greatest benefit is relative bodhicitta. Absolute bodhicitta, the practices of tranquility and insight, meditation, and so on are, of course, of ultimate benefit and are necessary once the person has calmed down. But we have to begin with a relative bodhicitta. And then something else occurred to me, Lama said, that I've been told that when the 11th Trungpa Rinpoche, who lived and passed away in this country in 1987, was close to the end of his life, he said, "You in the United States must never forget the Hinayana teachings." Now, it was interesting that he said this because by that point in his life, he had taught what he called the Hinayana, or basic teachings, the Mahayana, and quite a bit of Vajrayana. But he reminded whomever he was speaking to about the basic teachings. And I take this to mean that we need to sometimes keep our eyes back on the basic starting point.
Thank you. That 10.
This is all of
The doodles.
it. Okay.
10's already.
We're out of time.
Yeah, tomorrow. You keep your question tomorrow first. Okay, Tokichi, thank you. 240, right? Last word. Sonam de Tamje Sepa Nye Tone Nyebe Jana Panje Nye Jiga Namje Pala Choba Sepe Tone Rowa Yo Gewa Deye Gyeho Sona Yeshe Soto Sona Yeshe Lezo Tamba Kunyi Toba Yo Sanjo Senjo Rinpo Je Maje Pada Jijo Nyamba Meba Da Goni Gondo Kavaraiko Semje Tamje Dena Dejo Je Nido Tamje Tado Tombaraiko Sanjo Semba Ganda Saryo Deda Ganje Molam Joba Yo Sanje Ruje Tuzen Lambe Gajarkon Duya Dundole Pai Sajye Mezo Devu Sanga Yu Sije Sota Jabe Traye Yo Last one to thank you. Thank you everyone and have a good night. So thank you Pekin for me and see you tomorrow. Hopefully.